Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're continuing our exciting What If series. What if Naruto started training with Jiraiya early? Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss future episodes. And if you're enjoying this series, comment below. Naruto's journey has just begun. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the next chapter of Naruto's incredible adventure. Let's begin. Part 2. Jiraiya awoke to sunlight streaming in through the opening in his simple tent. He stepped out of it and into the fresh morning air. Taking a deep breath, he moved to Naruto's tent to wake him, only to find it empty, and from the looks of it, completely unused. Foregoing basic means of search, Jiraiya closed his eyes while making the ram seal, reaching out with his senses. It didn't take long to find Naruto's massive reserves, although they did feel quite depleted. Moving to the east of the clearing, Jiraiya walked about 200 feet into the line of trees. There, he found his student passed out snoring, in perhaps the most uncomfortable position to sleep in possible. Laying at the base of the trunk of a large tree, there was drool coming out of the left side of his mouth, and a snot bubble moved in tune with his light snoring from his right nostril. Yep, that was the fourth Hokage's son all right. Jiraiya examined the area a little closer. Many of the trees had varying sizes of bark splintered off. Given yesterday's training, he assumed the boy had been attempting the tree walking exercise. What's more, the tree he was laying under didn't have a single mark on it. That meant that he'd either fallen asleep before he could attempt to walk on it, or he had the exercise down. Knowing Naruto for a grand total of a day and a half, Jiraiya was absolutely positive that there was no chance he fell asleep before completing it enough to at least cling to the tree. The hyperactive blonde was too determined to give in that easily, and Jiraiya knew the speech he had given him had only fanned the flames of his determination. Deciding it was best to let him rest, Jiraiya sent a pair of shadow clones to pack up camp while he ran through a familiar set of hand seals. Summoning jutsu, Jiraiya said. A puff of smoke revealed a toad of about human height, albeit much wider. Gamma, this is my new apprentice that I sent word about. He seems to have overworked himself training last night. Mind giving him a ride for a few hours so he can catch up on sleep? The toad croaked once, which Jiraiya knew meant yes. He picked Naruto up easily, and secured him on his favorite summon's head. He was appalled at the makeup of the boy. He was nearly all skin and bones. What little muscle he did have was strong, probably a side effect of having the Kyuubi sealed inside of him. That would have to be one of the first things he would rectify. He couldn't handle the type of training that Jiraiya knew he would soon be begging for if his body lacked proper nourishment. His charge secured, Jiraiya headed back to camp to grab the sealing scrolls his clones would leave, with Gamma and Naruto in tow. It was nearly noon when Naruto finally awoke with a groan, sunlight beating down on him. Welcome back to the land of the living, Jiraiya let out cheerily. What happened, Gigi? Where are we? Jiraiya did not miss what he knew was Naruto's affectionate nickname for the Sandaime. I thought Sarutobi-sensei was Gigi. Don't worry, I'm sure Gramps will like his new nickname just as much as the old one. Haha, well as long as you call him Gramps, I'll be alright with old man. Jiraiya shouted out lightheartedly. As for what happened, I was hoping you could tell me. I found you outside of camp passed out under a tree. You had a sizable dent in your chakra reserves too. Jiraiya decided to let the boy brag a little bit, so he tossed him an easy question, how many leaves can you stick to your body now? Just 2, and even that was insanely hard. Naruto sounded exasperated, though 2 leaves in one day really wasn't that bad at all, progress was progress after all. This wasn't the answer Jiraiya had been expecting however. Only 2 I thought you'd have been able to do more than that by now, Jiraiya decided to push a little bit. Well, it's really hard to keep them in place without using chakra all over my body. Naruto said, clearly frustrated. Plus, it takes more focus to keep my feet stuck to the tree, and I kept dropping leaves and having to walk back down to pick them up and start over again. It was so slow going. Naruto complained. There was the surprise that Jiraiya was already beginning to expect each time he spoke with the boy. Going from 0 to 2 leaves in one night was something a fairly talented older academy student could do. For someone his age to get down tree walking in one night was bordering on prodigy. But he had seen Naruto struggle to narrow his chakra to even half his arm. With the amount of chakra he had, even Jiraiya was impressed. Well, why don't you walk me through how you got to where you did, and maybe I can help you increase that number. Naruto proceeded to clue in his sensei on his late-night training. Flashback. Naruto had been at it for about an hour when he finally turned over his arm, and one of the 2 leaves on it floated to the ground. Yes, he half shouted, the word dying in his mouth when he remembered his new sensei was sleeping in the nearby tent. He wasn't sure he could contain his excitement the more he advanced, so he decided to move a little farther away from camp. Once he was far enough away, he proceeded to continue the same exercise, however this time, he added another leaf between the 2. His goal was now to get the leaf in the middle to fall, and the 2 on the ends to stick when he turned his arm over. It took him about half an hour to get this down. The better feeling he got for it, the quicker he seemed to pick up the next step. When he got to holding 5 leaves, and dropping 5, about 6 hours after Jiraiya had gone to sleep, he decided it was time to give tree walking a shot. He didn't really know how many leaves he would need to be able to stick before he would be able to walk up a tree, but he was too excited not to try. He walked up to the nearest tree and put his foot on it as he had seen Jiraiya do, and tried to channel chakra into it to start walking and fell flat on his back. Dumb tree. He brushed himself off and gave it another shot. This time he tried a lot more chakra, and before he could even put his full weight on the tree, the bark exploded, leaving a large dent on the tree. He rested his hand on the tree as he thought. Channeling chakra for the leaves hadn't been too hard, only condensing it to a small area had been, and no matter how much he used, the leaves never exploded. He had even gotten to the point where he could easily stick a leaf on the end of each of his 10 fingers. He found channeling chakra there even easier than it was to channel to his arms. He guessed that made sense though, he was much more used to using his hands for finer control over things like chopsticks than he was his arms. And my feet, he thought. All he used those for were walking and running really, maybe even the occasional jump if he was excited. He looked at the tree in front of him and decided to try his hands first. Reaching up, he channeled chakra into his hands, and stuck them onto the tree. He then flexed his core and bent his knees so that he was just hanging by his chakra-stuck hands. He made it a few seconds before his control slipped enough for him to lose his grip and he fell. The next time he tried it, he made it in 30 seconds. The third time he had lost count at 2 minutes and let go because it became boring. This threw him into deep thought. It was obvious he could use chakra better in his hands than he could anywhere else. It also seemed obvious, to him at least, that this was because he was so used to using his hands for everything, that he not only used them for finer control, but he thought of them in terms of finer control. He pictured his hands and thought about 2 palms, which had a heel and a main flat part, and 5 fingers on each. Each finger had 3 sections except for the thumbs, which had 2. Then there were the tips of the fingers, which were different from the pads of them. He thought of them in small increments, each of which he could channel chakra to. He remembered the first lesson that Iruka had taught them when he got to the academy. He had only been awake and paying attention because it was a new sensei, and because he hadn't received any dirty looks from said sensei yet. The lesson was about the chakra system. It didn't make much sense to him then, but now when he recalled his favorite academy teacher, he remembered him saying there were points on the body where the chakra could be released. There wasn't one huge gate that chakra came out of, but a bunch of tiny little ones. He couldn't remember how many, or where they were, but if his newest sensei could walk on the tree, then there must be some in the foot. He tried to feel them in his feet, but felt nothing. He then tried to feel them in his hands, and thought he might have felt a vague something. It was less of feeling something, and more of just feeling that he could make chakra come out of certain areas, like he'd done it before. That checked out as far as he was concerned, so he began to think of his feet more completely. There was a heel, an inside arch, and the outer part of the middle of the foot. There was the ball of the foot, and the pad of it, as well as the pads of the 5 toes on each one. It didn't seem like there were as many parts to it as the hands, or at least parts that could come in contact with the tree. He guessed that was why ninjas used hand signs, and not foot signs, for jutsu. He figured his best shot was to try and focus on his heel, and the ball of his foot, as well as his toes. These were the spots that he was most familiar with because of walking and running. He put his foot on a different tree, and focused on the spots, trying to channel chakra to them individually. This time when he tried to step, he managed to lift his whole body up half a step before he slid back down to the ground. He grinned with excitement. That old toad man was in for a surprise in the morning. From there it was just trial and error trying to figure it out and get the feel for it. He found that if he tried to disperse his chakra into an area larger than his foot, that he had an easier time of staying securely in place. He'd mentally called this chakra leaking, as it felt like he was letting it leak from his control. It sounded counterintuitive, but it felt right. Most importantly, it seemed to work. After another 3 hours, he could walk somewhat steadily up and down a tree, and had even started to try and stick leaves to his torso while doing it. Just as the beginnings of a sunrise began to creep over the horizon, he had passed out while staring up at his most recent tree. End flashback. Jiraiya had listened quietly with interest, only interrupting to ask questions when he wanted something explained with a little more detail, or to chuckle at something he said. Well kid, once again you've gotten the right answer using the wrong formula, Jiraiya chuckled at him. You're technically wasting a ton of chakra doing the, what did you call it? Chakra leaking. By allowing it to leak out, you're using a large amount of chakra to do a small chakra task. You're probably expelling 4 or 5 times more than what's necessary, and the extra chakra is just being wasted so that the proper amount is actually going towards the technique. Jiraiya held up his hand to cut off his apprentice before he could become sad. But, once again Naruto, what you've done is kind of genius. You'll need to work on your control so you can feel locked in without using your chakra leaking method, but anybody else I know wouldn't be able to walk on a tree even a little bit with the amount of control you have. Sue, what does that mean exactly? Naruto asked slowly. He was trying his best to understand, but some of the things Jiraiya said just didn't make much sense. The young blonde deadpanned. Well then you are teaching since you're my sensei, he said, sticking his tongue out at the older ninja. Jiraiya's face palmed at his student's statement. I was just being sarcastic, Naruto. What I'm trying to say is that you're really good at doing things in ways they weren't designed to be done. Unpredictable if you will, and your instincts for finding a way to get it done are second to none, not even the 4th Hokage's. Jiraiya hated to inflate the boy's ego, especially considering he was a bit of a loudmouth already, but he did enjoy seeing the boy's eyes go wide and his face light up with praise. Well I think you've rested enough, Gamma you can go, thank you for your assistance. The toad poofed back to its home with nothing more than a ribbit, causing Naruto to fall on his butt. Ow, what the hell was that for you old geezer? You could have let me hop down first. Naruto hollered at Jiraiya while rubbing his backside. If you think that hurts, maybe we shouldn't start your physical training today. After all, I'm sure you're not as tough as Sasuke Uchiha. I heard he can do 100 push-ups, all in one go. I bet you can't even do 50 right now. Naruto had steam pouring out of his ears by the end of Jiraiya's taunting. Instead of trying to argue with the old man, Naruto wordlessly stared him down with all the might he could muster at 7.5, and slowly dropped to the ground and began doing push-ups, right in the middle of the road. No kid, I didn't mean to do it right, oh whatever, let's see what you got. And, that's 88. Not too bad brat, definitely better than I expected. Naruto was still at the top of his last push-up, his arms were locked out, his face was red, and sweat was dripping off his nose onto the compact dirt road. Not done, yet, he managed to get out to Jiraiya. You know, you have to go down again to get 89. Can't, Jiraiya heard through ragged breaths. Then why don't you stop or drop? You can rest up and we can try again later, or do some other exercises. Won't let Sasuke win. Naruto was shaking like a leaf in a desert breeze at this point, and Jiraiya was once again impressed with Naruto's determination. It seemed he had inherited the indomitable will that made both his parents such strong ninja. Although he seemed to already be matching them in it despite his young age. Jiraiya shuddered at how terrifying this little blonde would grow up to be. Being the awesome and insanely handsome and great teacher that Jiraiya was, he put his foot on Naruto's back, and pressed him down so he had to drop out of his push-up stance. What the hell did you do that for, old man? You made me lose to that bastard, that's not fair. He couldn't tell if Naruto's face was red from the exercise, or anger at having, in his mind, lost. Life's not fair, kid, especially the life of a shinobi. You don't like it? Then do something about it. And watch your language, that's pretty foul for a 6-year-old, Jiraiya paused, if only fairly briefly, to ignore Naruto's indignant shout that he was, in fact, almost 8. It doesn't really bother me at all, but you don't wanna pick up bad habits so early in life. He left out that he had picked up many bad habits, and Tsunade had punished him many times because of it. It wasn't worth the trouble, well maybe it was to him. Naruto brought Jiraiya out of his train of thoughts. Fine, but what am I supposed to do about you putting your foot on my back? You're huge and probably weigh like 1,000 pounds. Naruto protested. Better get a lot stronger then, or come up with a way to skirt the traditional way of doing things. Naruto looked like he was going to protest, but his face froze in thought, and then he grinned. Jiraiya had seen that evil, malicious grin from another Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi before. He was terrified, and it had nothing to do with the beast sealed in the boy. Moving along now, and completely disregarding that last train of thought, Jiraiya said quickly, I believe I owe you a jutsu. Previous devious thoughts completely forgotten, Naruto jumped up and pumped a fist in the air in excitement. Yes, one step closer to being the greatest ninja ever. Okay kid, Shinobi lesson number 1, Jiraiya said, clearing out his ear with a pinky, stealth and deception are a ninja's best tool, not a kunai, and not a big fancy jutsu. You gotta learn to control your emotions, whether they're good or bad. Jiraiya explained, it's okay to be loud when you're in the village around familiar people, but when we're out on the road, you might want to tone it down a little bit unless we've made camp. Jiraiya finished. How come it's okay to be loud at camp? Won't that alert possible enemies to where we are? Naruto questioned seriously. Jiraiya had to give the kid credit. He might have had the attention span of one of Inuzuka's Ninken puppies, but he was curious in all the right ways, and asked great questions. Jiraiya told him as much. Great question, Naruto. Those shadow clones I send out place down seals on the perimeter of the camp. One of the seals they put down is a privacy seal, so nobody can hear us while we're in it. I'll show you some of the other seals tonight, and explain what they do too. Jiraiya was already learning to predict how Naruto would think and thus was answering some of his questions before he could even ask them, if the boy's facial expression was anything to go by. Okay, thank you Jiraiya-sensei. Also, didn't we already do lesson number 1? You said lesson number 1 yesterday. Jiraiya nodded at this, so Naruto continued. How can they both be number 1? In this world, all these lessons, everything you learn as a ninja, are equally important. Whether it's how to stay quiet, or how to throw a kunai, or what jutsu is best for which situation, any one of them could save your life, and forgetting them could cost you it, so they all are number 1, Jiraiya finished softly. That doesn't make any sense but I don't really care. Now teach me that jutsu so I can kick Sasuke's butt, you know. Naruto exclaimed, although much quieter than the first time. Jiraiya nodded and motioned for Naruto to follow him, and led him away from the road. Where are we going Jiraiya-sensei? The young blonde questioned. The shadow clone jutsu is a technique of Konoha invented by the Nadaime Hokage Tobirama Senju himself. Jiraiya explained. While the jutsu isn't exactly a secret considering how often it's used, and taking into account missing nin, it still wouldn't have any spies learning the technique in great detail, straight from the mouth of one of our elite ninja. Jiraiya, being an experienced spy himself, probably the most experienced in the elemental nations if he thought about it, knew nobody was following them. Going a little out of their way to drill a lesson into the kid wouldn't hurt them at all though, they were making good time anyway. I don't see any of our elite ninja around here sensei. Are you one of those Anbu guys with the masks following us in the trees? Naruto playfully said with a huge grin, making a big deal of shading his eyes and looking up into the trees. Jiraiya rolled his eyes in an attempt to quell his anger. The boy knew how to push his buttons, that was for certain. Just listen up brat, I'll make 4 clones to put down seals so we can work on the technique away from prying eyes. Jiraiya said as he made a cross sign with his hands and summoned 5 copies of himself. Once the 4 designated seals were done with their jobs, Jiraiya began. The first thing you need to know about this jutsu is that it uses a lot of chakra. More than just about any genin should be able to be used. Because of this, you are forbidden from ever teaching anybody this technique without permission from myself, or the Hokage. Am I clear? Jiraiya being serious was a sign that Naruto shouldn't joke around, so he just quietly nodded. Second, the clones break fairly easily. Jiraiya turned and punched the 5th clone that he had summoned, finally quenching Naruto's curiosity of its purpose. They don't have the durability that some of the other corporeal clones like the earth clone or the flexibility of the water clone. Jiraiya continued to explain, in what Naruto would come to think of as his sensei voice. However, despite these weaknesses, they can be extremely useful. Yes Naruto, you don't have to raise your hand though, you're my only student. Jiraiya said with some confusion. Oh, sorry sensei, Iruka sensei said it was rude to talk without raising my hand. Naruto shot out quickly before getting to his question. What other kind of clones are there? You said earth and water, and this one is a shadow. Are there fire clones? What about light clones? Can I make a clone out of kunai? Naruto inquired. This kid would probably give Jiraiya an aneurysm by the time he graduated the academy. He just had a way of questioning what essentially was hundreds of years of training and the status quo, without even seeming to try. He was just that curious and thought that far outside the box. Actually, there was no box in Naruto's brain, it was more like a 100-sided object that was continuously shifting. Jiraiya thought some more before answering. You ask some good questions, kid. And they were good, and Jiraiya would definitely be looking into the last one that he had mentioned. Stupid kid geniuses. Fire clones, as far as I know, are too unstable and too damaging to themselves to be of any real use, or even be considered a technique. Wind clones would be even harder to control, and potentially dangerous to anybody using them if they burst at the wrong time. Jiraiya was more thinking aloud here than responding to Naruto. A lightning clone is an existing jutsu, and quite a dangerous one at that, especially in the hands of Kakashi. I suppose you could make a kunai clone, although going about it would be difficult, and I'm not sure what its use would be. The first Hokage was an avid user of wood clone, and of course there's the Academy standard clone, which is more of a genjutsu really. I suppose you could make a clone out of anything really, whether it's worth it or not just depends on the chakra cost and the abilities of the clone. Jiraiya concluded. Sensei. Yes, Naruto, I think I'm gonna need a notepad or something, that's kind of a lot to remember, isn't it? Naruto questioned. It was less of a lesson, and more of satisfying your curiosity, but you can't use notes in the field, kid. We will go over it as many times as we need until you know it by heart. We can revisit clones later during a chakra theory lesson. For now, it's time to teach you the shadow clone jutsu. Naruto was bouncing up and down, almost vibrating at this point. Come on, sensei, let's do this. Jiraiya chuckled and nodded. All right, brat. For starters, I'll only allow you to try and make one until you get better control of your chakra. I don't need my own sensei mad at me if you end up killing yourself on your first real jutsu. The blonde paled at this, but his face never lost its determination. The hand sign is really simple. You extend your middle and pointer finger on both hands, and make a plus sign with them. A plus, because you're adding more of yourself. Jiraiya had never thought about it that way. At the time he had learned it, he was just excited he could have more than one of him to kick Orochimaru's. Not that it worked. That's exactly right, Gaki. Glad you picked up on that so I didn't have to tell you. He had no shame. He couldn't let the almost 8-year-old think he was more clever than one of the Sannin. Now, when you're molding chakra, just picture your chakra forming into an exact version of yourself. Most people can't get it even the first few times, so we can try meditation to become more in tune with your body if you struggle with it. In truth, most jonin took days to learn the technique, and that was only if they had well above average reserves, but the boy was so full of surprises, he wouldn't be surprised if he did it the very first attempt. Alright, I think I got sensei, just watch me, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. There was a huge poof of smoke, bigger than when Naruto had unsealed his backpack way back in Konoha. When it cleared, standing there was Naruto. Just one of him. Damn it. First, how do you feel? Tired at all? Naruto shook his head. In fact, he felt better than he had before he tried. Alright then, you can try again. Try and focus on forcing your chakra into an area that's about your size. Naruto nodded. He was surprisingly quiet when he was focused. The blonde terror made the hand sign, called out the jutsu name as forcefully as he could, and tried to make a copy of himself. Another plume of smoke, and there was a deflated-looking version of himself lying next to him. He sighed. It's alright, Naruto, you can't get everything on the first try. Still feeling okay? Jiraiya questioned cautiously. He really didn't want Sarutobi mad at him. Yeah, I actually have felt better after trying the last 2 times, like I'm more calm and less like I'm gonna burst. Jiraiya looked perplexed at this, so Naruto just kept talking. Honestly, it feels wrong. Do you mind if I try something? Jiraiya nodded. The boy had proven himself plenty capable of finding solutions already. Just don't overdo it and use too much chakra. Naruto nodded. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto said, making the hand sign. He closed his eyes and focused on a mental image of himself, and pictured more appearing around him the way they had for Jiraiya. He then willed his chakra to act and do as he wanted. There was another puff of smoke, this one wider than tall. When it was all clear, there were 5 perfect copies of Naruto standing around with the biggest grins Jiraiya had ever seen. Jiraiya walked up and poked one right in the forehead despite its protests. Yup, it was solid. He turned to the real Naruto. Are you okay? He asked seriously. Nod. How much chakra would you say you have left after those 3 attempts? Just a rough estimate will work. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Sensei. As far as I can tell, that was the same amount of chakra that I used when I tried to just make 1. I wasn't even trying to make 5, I just pictured you making them when I molded the chakra, and it happened by accident. It doesn't even feel like I used any chakra, or maybe I don't know what that feels like. Jiraiya just shook his head, looked up at Naruto, opened his mouth, and then shook it again. You're something else, brat, ya know that. Naruto smiled at him. So you keep telling me, ya geezer, he beamed. Just for that, I'm imposing a limit on you. You can't use the jutsu unless it's to practice it, until you can make exactly 1 clone. And I better not see a giant puff of smoke either. With the amount of chakra you used to make 5, you probably could have made 30. I won't teach you any more jutsu until you do, Jiraiya exclaimed. What? You finally teach me a jutsu, and I'm not even allowed to use it? That's so unfair, old man. Naruto retorted indignantly. Have you forgotten lesson number 1 already, my precious student? Jiraiya asked teasingly. No, lesson number 1. A shinobi's life is unfair, if you don't like it, do something about it. Naruto recited monotonously. So his ears do work. Great job, kid, now drop and give me 80 more push-ups, Jiraiya nearly sang at Naruto. I hate you, Naruto grumbled. I don't care, Jiraiya laughed back. This next part should admittedly have been a whole new chapter, no clue what I was thinking putting all this in one. Now is a good time for a water break and a posture check. 3 days later, Naruto and Jiraiya found themselves in another clearing, not unlike the one they were in the first night on the road. They had made their way deep into the land of rivers to meet with a contact of Jiraiya's spy network. Naruto had been working hard on his chakra control, as well as his physical strength, and although he had seen much more progress in the former than the latter, he had still managed to do 103 push-ups. Sasuke was gonna get his butt whooped when he got back to Konoha. He could already picture it. Jiraiya interrupted him from his mental happy place. Alright brat, you think you got it down? Let's see it, Jiraiya requested. Naruto nodded, took a step back, closed his eyes, and took a deep inhale. He let it out calmly, and made the necessary hand signs. As Jiraiya looked on, his blonde student disappeared and was replaced with a wooden log. Jiraiya felt Naruto's presence behind him and turned around. Well done Naruto, you've come a long way. Naruto beamed at the praise. Jiraiya had just shown him the substitution jutsu yesterday morning, and he could already do it without saying the jutsu name. Jiraiya had said that the jutsu was one of the most important things a ninja could master, and Naruto had taken him seriously and worked hard at it. However, if you truly want to master it, you'll have to do it much faster than that. If you can increase your speed though, it can keep you alive against much tougher opponents, and get you out of some sticky situations. Naruto nodded. Now, why don't you make a few clones, and send them to get some food? Fish should be easy to come by. Naruto nodded again and made the sign, and popped 10 clones into existence. Jiraiya shook his head, it was like the jutsu was made for the kid. Despite only minor improvements to his chakra control, he'd gotten down to 1 clone, with minimal chakra smoke. It really wasn't fair. Sensei. Naruto waggled a finger at him with a smile. Don't forget Shinobi's lesson number 1. He giggled before sending his clones off to do his dirty work for him. Jiraiya sighed. Damn prodigies. Jiraiya reached into his vest and pulled out Naruto's scroll that the Sandaime had given him. Naruto, I think it's time you opened this scroll up. Do you really mean Jiraiya-sensei? Because you wouldn't let me earlier even after I completed both the tasks you gave me, he said cheekily. I wanted to wait much longer for this, but it seems you're determined to break that timetable by years, Jiraiya said. But there's some things you must know before I let you open it. First, this information was kept from you and the villagers because it's dangerous. Jiraiya was using his Sannin super powerful serious shinobi voice, so Naruto knew he was dead serious, but he was still confused. Knowing who his mother was is dangerous. Jiraiya seemed to catch on to his train of thought, and continued. Both of your parents were powerful ninja, and they both racked up quite a few enemies in their time as Leaf Nin. Not only did they have enemies, but your mother's clan feared across the elemental nations, that's why they were all but wiped out in the Second Great Shinobi War, Jiraiya said solemnly. I don't believe anybody in Konoha would try to harm you because of that, but they might try to take advantage of you because of your surname. It carries a lot of weight. When you become a Chunin or turn 16, you'll technically own a seat on the council. Technically he would own two, since any Hokage's family name legally becomes a clan name according to the law. He wasn't ready to hear that though. I have a clan. What is it? What's my real name? Naruto didn't know what to think, didn't know what to feel, and his face betrayed that. There was a swirling hurricane of emotions written all over it. Uzumaki. That hasn't changed. I know they told you that it was just a random name given to some orphans, but you're the one and only one that's in Konoha. But they're all gone now. Naruto squeaked out. Jiraiya nodded, and then elaborated, I'm sure there are others out there, maybe even a few that carry the name, but the clan and village are gone, Jiraiya said sadly. Naruto nodded, eyes still down in sadness. Do you think I could rebuild it when I become Hokage? I think you can start even before then. After you open this scroll, you'll be considered a full-fledged Uzumaki, and when you return to Konoha, your status as an heir will be solidified. Naruto was pleased at that, but couldn't find it in him to feel excited. Jiraiya handed over the scroll. The swirls on the end caps are the Uzumaki clan symbol. They were from another hidden village called Uzushiogakure, but they were such close allies with Konoha that the clan symbol is on the back of every single Chunin and Jonin vest that the village issues, Jiraiya informed him. According to Sensei, not making it in time to stop their destruction is one of his greatest failures and biggest regrets. Naruto nodded. How do I open it? It's a blood seal. Anybody with Uzumaki blood just needs to run some over the seal, and then channel chakra like I showed you on the storage scroll, and it'll open. Jiraiya pointed to where he needed to channel chakra. Naruto bit his thumb like he had seen Jiraiya do when he summoned one of his awesome toads, and ran the bloody digit across the seal. He channeled chakra where he was shown, and instead of bursting in smoke, the black ink formula began to retract in on itself in a swirling motion, until it made its own little version of the Uzumaki crest. Naruto gripped the left cap and twisted. It came off fairly easily, and when he looked inside, he saw a large storage scroll, with a much smaller one next to it. He pulled both of them out, and opted to unroll the smaller one first. On the paper he found his surrogate grandfather's writing. Naruto, I'm sorry that I'm not there to tell you about this in person, and that I wasn't able to tell you earlier in your life. In hindsight, keeping this from you seems like an unnecessary measure, and I apologize for that, for I only had your best interests at heart. Your mother was Kushina Uzumaki. She was a red-headed kunoichi, with a fiery temperament and an indomitable will. She was determined beyond what seemed possible and stubborn as an ox. She was also one of the kindest women I had the pleasure of knowing. Though you don't have her hair or her eyes, you seem to carry on that Uzumaki stubbornness that she was so well known for. Her nickname was the Red Hot Habanero, and she lived up to it every single day of her life. She was vicious yet graceful, stubborn yet loyal, terrifying yet beautiful. She was your mother, and she loved you more than anything in the world. More than life itself. I cannot go into detail about the situation. But the night the Kyuubi attacked, she saved you from its wrath. She loved you so much, that she sacrificed her life, so that you could live yours. You may have felt lonely all these years in the village by yourself, but just know, you've never truly been alone, because she's a part of you, and always will be. I have included a picture of her in the small seal at the bottom of this scroll, as well as her necklace that she wore every day, on or off duty. Though the pendant that was on it broke, it is a piece of her that you can wear to remind you of where you come from. Perhaps we can find you a pendant to go with it. Inside the larger sealing scroll is every piece of Uzumaki history, artifacts, techniques, pictures, and anything else I could find within Konoha, as well as locations that you could potentially find more, though I wish that you let Jiraiya dictate when you go to those locations so that you are safe. I do hope you can forgive me for holding out on telling you this and giving you your inheritance for this long. I see you as my first grandson Naruto, and just like your mother, I love you very much. Sincerely, the Sandaime Hokage, or Gigi, as you call me. Naruto was pouring tears before he even came close to finishing the note. He had a mother. She sounded so badass and amazing, and it made him so sad that he couldn't meet her, and wouldn't ever get the chance to meet her until he too passed. But she had loved him so much that she had died for him. He couldn't believe it, but he was sobbing about it. He wished he knew how to set up those privacy seals so that Jiraiya wouldn't see him like this. It was embarrassing. Jiraiya laid a hand on his shoulder. It's okay to cry, kid, remember the very first thing I taught you. It's okay to cry if you're happy. Shinobi lesson number 0. Naruto nodded, but didn't stop sobbing. Your mom was truly one of a kind, just like you. You remind me of her every day, and she would be so proud of you, it would be unbearable to be around. She would tell everyone in a 10-mile radius about how great you are, and she'd beat anybody who disagreed into the ground. Naruto laughed at this, but it came out as an awkward sob with a lot of snot thrown in. I'll go check how the clones are doing with food and give you some space. I won't be far, holler if you need me. You remember which part of the storage seal to open? Naruto nodded, getting his sobs under control a little bit. Good, don't open the big scroll until you call me back, okay? Jiraiya got another nod, so he body flickered out of the clearing in the directions that Naruto's clones had gone. Naruto looked at the seal at the bottom of the page, and channeled chakra where he was supposed to. He was ready to see his mother. With a poof larger than the scroll itself, Naruto unsealed the picture of his mom and her necklace. His breath was taken away. She was beautiful in every meaning of the word. He couldn't believe he was related to such an angel. His mom was so pretty and so cool, that his dad must have been the coolest guy in the whole world to get to marry her. Probably cooler than the Yondaime, he thought before thinking that it probably wasn't possible. I'll rebuild the clan, and any Uzumaki out there will be welcome to come and rejoin. The Uzumakis will be a name that's respected once again, and they'll live in a huge compound in Konoha. I promise, he said quietly to her picture, as he put the peculiar necklace around his neck. It was just a blank leather cord, black and worn. Naruto hugged her picture and cried, bawling for what felt like hours but was probably only 15 minutes. When he finally felt like he was out of tears, he rubbed his eyes and took a deep breath. Once composed, he called for Jiraiya, and in seconds he was back in the clearing with the fish. I accidentally pushed your clones into the river and dispelled them, hope that's not a problem, Jiraiya said, hoping for some comedic relief. Naruto gave a dry chuckle. It's fine, old man. He didn't have enough in him to start an argument with the spiky-haired sage, as much fun as it usually was. Will you go through my inheritance with me? He asked hopefully. Are you sure? Everything in that scroll is squarely yours, Naruto. I know Sarutobi-sensei sealed some techniques in there for you, and you don't have to show them to me or anybody else if you don't want to. Those are clan techniques. Your clan's techniques, Jiraiya explained. Naruto seemed to be in awe at this. He truly couldn't fathom it. But if I'm the only one in the clan, I can decide who gets to see the techniques, right? Jiraiya nodded. Then I want you to look at them with me, and help me train them, if you would. Jiraiya nodded again, not really trusting his voice. This boy had brought out feelings he didn't know he was capable of feeling anymore. After a few seconds of silence, Naruto picked up the large sealing scroll, but paused. Do you have a clan called Jiraiya-sensei? He asked. Jiraiya responded, nope, my dad was a shinobi, though he went Mia when I was really young, I barely remember him. My mom was just a civilian. Jiraiya smiled, it's one of the reasons I chose to train the 4th Hokage, he was from a completely civilian family. I guess you could say you already have a leg up on him. Naruto thought deeply for a second. It was pretty cool, but resolved not to let that keep him from working hard. Alright, let's bust this baby open and see what kind of badass stuff my clan left me. Naruto shouted. This earned him a smack in the back of the head. Language. And what did I say about being so loud? Jiraiya scolded him. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and grumbled, yeah, Shinobi lesson number 1, stealth and deception are a ninja's number 1 tool, I remember. He slid the scroll in front of him, and unrolled it horizontally, revealing a large sealing matrix that was different from the one Jiraiya had shown them back in the village. Alright brat, what we have here is a multi-point sealing scroll. Child's play for the Uzumaki of the past. See how it's divided into these sections. Jiraiya pointed to several different areas of the circular seal, all of which looked like slices of pie. Naruto nodded in what Jiraiya was calling his learning mode. Quiet, attentive, and focused. Each section is actually a storage seal, and therefore each has its own separate formula that can be used to open it. So that means you can store multiple types of things. Naruto finished in question, but why not just seal everything in one formula and just pull out what you want? Good question, Naruto. There are different seals that work better for different things. A regular storage scroll will only hold so much, so you can use a different version to hold larger or more items. Some things deteriorate over time, so they need a stasis storage seal. In this case, it's most likely because sealing other scrolls with seals on them requires a special formula, as well as separating items by category so that if the person meant to open it doesn't know what's in it, he or she doesn't have to unseal every single thing at once. Jiraiya finished explaining. So basically for organization or specific needs. The young blonde tried to summarize. That's the gist of it. We can get into it deeper if you choose to learn more Fuinjutsu in the future. The Toad Sage told him. Now, let's start with the section in the 12 o'clock position. You should recognize the matrix for opening it if you look closely. Jiraiya had spent some time over the last couple of days explaining the basic terminology of Fuinjutsu. Seals were made up of sealing formulas. Formulas are made of matrices, which dictate what the seals do. Extremely basic as there were more than a dozen more terms and exceptions to rules and whatnot, but the almost 8-year-old was nowhere near ready to handle all that. Naruto eyed the formula closely, and found what he was looking for. Using a fraction of the chakra he had the very first time, he channeled some into the matrix, and heard the telltale pop, and poof of smoke and found, books. Maybe being in a clan isn't all that it's cracked up to be, he thought. He immediately tried to move on to the next section of sealing formula, but Jiraiya stopped him. Whoa, slow your roll there Gaki, aren't you gonna even look at those books? Naruto grumbled back, I hate books. They're dumb. Listen Naruto, I know they're not as exciting as jutsu, but those could be really important to your clan history. Hell, they might even contain some jutsu in them. Jiraiya exclaimed. This time Naruto's grumbles couldn't even be picked up by Jiraiya's enhanced hearing. What was that, kid? Naruto turned on him and yelled, I can't read okay. Nobody ever taught me. He hung his head in shame. He didn't like talking about it. The last time he had brought it up, his first academy teacher had ignored him, and the entire class had made fun of him non-stop for it. What do you mean you can't read? You read the Hokage's letter just now didn't you? Sannin questioned. I know how to read some stuff, and Gigi knows which words I know well enough to piece together what he's saying, but most books are way too hard for me, and it takes forever. He grumbled, still looking down at the ground. Jiraiya took a deep breath, trying to quell the thoughts of murder running through his head. Sensei knew he couldn't read properly, and still did nothing about it. Unacceptable in Jiraiya's mind. Well then let's fix that. What kind of sensei would I be if I didn't help you learn? Besides, if I teach you now, I won't have to explain as much later on. Less work for me. Jiraiya gave the boy a smile, trying to cover up his anger. Naruto wasn't experienced enough to read Jiraiya's true feelings, so all he saw was his sensei offering to help him, and smiling at him. Naruto smiled back, okay geezer, but you can't make me enjoy reading. He shot back softly. I wouldn't dare to even try Naruto. Jiraiya chuckled back at him. With that, the two continued opening the sections, Jiraiya explaining what each was. Wholesome moment from last chapter. A large man walked into the shop, followed by a much smaller blonde child. The larger of the two was obviously a shinobi given the head protector, although the tailor had never heard of an oil village. We need some new rags for my companion here. The white-haired man gestured to the small child, whose nose was buried in a book. The boy was wearing what appeared to be very dirty blue sweatpants, with a green long-sleeve shirt that had a white shirt over the top of it. As the tailor took in the boy, subconsciously measuring him with his eyes, the young blonde's face twisted in confusion, and perhaps frustration, and tugged on his large companion's sleeve. When he had the shinobi's attention, he pointed to a word in the book and curled his head. Indomitable. Do you know what that means? The boy curled his head the other way, apparently in thought, and after a few seconds of pondering, nodded his head with a small smile. So what were we thinking? Training gear perhaps? The tailor guessed based off of the boy's appearance and apparent shinobi father. What do you think, Naruto? The boy looked back up at Jiraiya, and then smiled such a warm, blindingly big smile, that the tailor couldn't help but smile himself. 8 months after Naruto left Konoha, Naruto was interrupted from practicing his calligraphy when Jiraiya came into the clearing. He hated practicing calligraphy, but he wasn't thinking of that now. Something was wrong. Jiraiya had never moved that urgently since Naruto had left Konoha with him, least of all in their spars. Jiraiya was moving about camp busily packing things up. He stopped and shook his head like he was disappointed in himself, and made 3 shadow clones to continue his work. He turned to Naruto. An urgent matter has come up at the village. I have to go back, and fast. You won't be able to keep up with me, but I have a solution for that. Naruto saw the worried look on his master's face, and decided it wasn't the time for his newest nickname. Sensei, what's wrong? Is the village okay? Jiraiya didn't know what to say. He couldn't tell a boy who'd only turned 8 for a few months that an entire clan had just been wiped out. They hadn't even addressed the fact that as a shinobi he would one day have to take a life. More than a couple if he ended up being any good. Just clan business, nothing you need to worry about, kiddo. I thought you didn't have a clan. Naruto asked curiously. I don't, it's not my clan business, but you know, as the Hokage's student, he sometimes recalls me to advise him on important matters. Jiraiya said with as much bravado as he could muster. He was trying to keep the boy innocent as long as possible. If you say so. Don't expect me to have you as an advisor when I'm Hokage just because you were my sensei though. You'll have to earn that position fair and square, Naruto retorted. Jiraiya gave him a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, a feeble attempt at hiding his emotional state. Naruto wasn't even a genin, and yet his eyes narrowed as he noticed yet again that something was wrong with his sensei. So what am I gonna do while you're gone? And how long will you be gone? And are you sure I'm not fast enough to keep up with you? The young blonde questioned. Yes, I'm positive, and it'll be another 30 years before you can catch me if you don't start working harder. A sensei was a sensei, and therefore Jiraiya was always trying to keep the boy motivated. He wanted to tell him about his father as soon as possible, but he had to get stronger and more mature first, something training hard would accomplish. How would you like to become a toad summoner? He asked before Naruto could argue that he was training harder than anybody, especially Sasuke, that jerk. Whoa, you mean I'll be able to summon Gamma? Garotora? Naruto asked in awe and wonderment. Not just those two Gaki, but any of the toads. Ones the size of small mountains, or ones strong enough to lift a stone 50 times their size. Jiraiya's mood picked up momentarily. He couldn't help it, toads were awesome. Whoa, how do I do it? How do I do it? Show me the hand signs again. Naruto was beyond excited, Jiraiya's odd mood completely forgotten. Alright, kiddo, here are the signs, but don't use them yet, you have to sign the contract first. Jiraiya bit his thumb and wet the end of each finger with the blood it produced. One of the conditions of the summoning jutsu is that it requires a small blood sacrifice each time it is used. He began going through the hand signs slowly, while saying them out loud for Naruto's benefit. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram, Kuchio's no jutsu summoning technique, a now familiar puff of smoke in the air, and soon Gamma was standing before Naruto, a green and red scroll wrapped up in its tongue. Jiraiya grabbed the scroll when Gamma unfurled it out to him, and he unrolled the scroll on the ground. There were names written on the scroll in typical vertical fashion, in what looked like blood. Below the names were fingerprints, also in blood. Naruto, being the sharp kunai that he was, didn't even wait for Jiraiya to explain. He just bit down on his thumb and began writing his name in the blood he produced, in remarkably good handwriting for a child his age. When he was done, he bloodied all 5 fingers on his right hand and left a print, just like the others had. Congratulations Gaki, you now have one more thing in common with the 4th Hokage, to go with your looks and sensei. Jiraiya had explained that he looked a bit like the 4th, and that's one of the main reasons that Jiraiya had taken an interest in him, so this made sense. Wait a minute, no it didn't. Wait, you're telling me, Yondaime was a toad summoner too. And now I am. Why Naruto was shocked was beyond Jiraiya. The boy already knew he had trained him, it shouldn't have been that hard to put 2 and 2 together. He guessed Naruto still had a way to go intelligence-wise, despite his newfound interest in books. Yes Gaki, I was his sensei, remember? I gave him the toad summoning contract, with the toad's permission of course. They have also given me permission to allow you to sign it, though we won't have time to train in it. I've gotta get going, Jiraiya finished. Wait, what am I gonna do then? Naruto had never had his question answered, Jiraiya had just offered him the contract. You are going to MT. Myoboku, it's the ancient and sacred home of the toads. Jiraiya explained, before turning to a large orange toad. Gamma, please report back to Fukasaku and Shima and please tell them to reverse summon Naruto and I. Jiraiya asked. The toad croaked and vanished in a puff of smoke. If this MT, Myobarno, Myoboku, that's what I said, Naruto growled back. If this MT, Myoboku place is so sacred and great, how come I've never heard of it? The blonde questioned petulantly. Sacred means that it's a place of great meaning to the toads. Therefore, Very few people are ever allowed to visit their home, and that means very few people even know of its existence. I'm the only one alive that's been, and I can only think of 3 other people that even know of its existence. Jiraiya offered. Naruto nodded. So how do we get there? You said something about inverted summoning or something. Reverse summoning. Jiraiya corrected it again. When you have a summoning contract signed in blood, if the summon is strong enough, they can reverse summon you to their home, just as you can summon them. Is it gonna hurt? What happens if they summon you when you're in the show? There was a puff of smoke and the curious blonde disappeared. Nobody was there to witness it though, as the Toad Sage was reverse summoned at the exact same time. Mount Myoboku, home of the Toad Summons. What the hell was that old man? Naruto screamed, rubbing his butt, which he had promptly fallen on after his first experience with a space-time ninjutsu. Yes, he does seem to have quite a bit of fire in him, just like his mother did. He sure does, Pa, he sure does. Jiraiya replied sadly. Naruto, come here, I want to introduce you to Ma and Pa. Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama, this is Naruto, my new student. Naruto looked down at the 2 tiny, wrinkled toads standing next to Jiraiya. Or were they sitting? He couldn't really tell because of how small they were, and the overcoats that they wore. Hiya Fukasaku-sama, Shima-sama. Naruto waved awkwardly. Gaki, it's Fukasaku, not Fukasasuke. They're both sages. Have some respect. Jiraiya corrected it with a facepalm. Oh, who cares, Jiraiya boy? Naruto boy, it's so good to finally meet you. Jiraiya has sent a few messages about you, and that got us quite excited to meet our newest summoner. Fukasaku said. It's great to meet you too, Grandpa Sage. Naruto said with a smile. Naruto, respect. Jiraiya was exasperated. He didn't have time for this. Oh whatever, pervy sage. Naruto hollered with an accusational point, including his newest nickname for his sensei. If you're a sage, then it must not be that special, you old pervert. Naruto finished yelling. Oh, I like him, Fukasaku and Shima said in unison. He caught me doing research one time, and now he won't stop calling me that nickname. Jiraiya lamented. That's a very funny, Naruto boy, but I assure you the power of a sage is no joke. Fukasaku explained while walking over to a giant stone toad statue. Wait, power? You mean being a sage isn't just about pretending to be all wise? Naruto questioned. Jiraiya, what have you been teaching the boy? Hopefully not just how to peek in women's baths. Shima called out. You're half right, Naruto boy. Sages like us are incredibly wise, and should you ever need counsel, we would be happy to help you. However, we are also incredibly powerful. Observe. Fukasaku clapped his hands together and became unnaturally still for a moment. Then he pulled his hands apart, and gripped the foot of the toadstone. It was at least 30 times his size, yet the wrinkly toad lifted it above his head like Naruto would lift a scroll. Extreme ease. Naruto didn't see any difference in the old toad after he clapped his hands together, but when he was done he felt powerful. Like way more powerful. Naruto's eyes were still wide in awe. You have got to teach me that. I could kick Sasuke's bastard so easily with that language. Whatever, pervy sage, you know it's true. Please teach me, Grandpa Sage. Sorry lad, you're too young for it, and your body wouldn't be able to take the strain the technique would put on it. When you are properly developed though, I would be more than happy to teach you. Really? That's great, Naruto shouted. Is there anything else you can teach me in the meantime? Before either of the elder toads could answer that, Jiraiya cut in. Naruto, focus up real quick. And just like that, Naruto's blue eyes were locked onto him in complete focus. Jiraiya was no longer taken aback by the intensity of his student, but sometimes he forgot just how intensely focused he could get when need be. I have to deal with the village emergency. I'll probably be gone for around a month. Ma and Pa will take care of you in the meantime, and I'm sure they'll help you continue your training if you're respectful of them and their home. The 2 elder toads nodded at this. There was a flash of something in the boy's eyes. Something sad. It happened so quickly, Jiraiya wasn't even 100% sure he actually saw it before they returned back to their normal glow. Alright, pervy sage, I bet by the time you get back I'll be able to kick your butt too. Naruto shouted. Jiraiya gave Naruto one final genuine smile before shining, body flickering, away. So Naruto, you seem to get along well with Jiraiya if your getup is any indication. Shima said. Naruto looked down at his outfit. The nice tailor in River Country had gladly made him a copy of Jiraiya's gear with some small exceptions. He wore the green robe jacket and green shinobi pants that were loose and tied up just below the knee just like him, as well as the mesh armor underneath, and the green guards for the back of his hands. Instead of a red kabuki jacket with yellow circles on the shoulders, Naruto wore a blue one with red Uzumaki clan crest sewed on in place of the circles. He also wore blue wooden geta on his feet instead of red like Jiraiya's, though he still had a little bit of trouble moving in them, and struggled to water walk with them on. Rounding out the outfit was a large blue and red scroll strapped to his back just like Jiraiya's, though Naruto's was red with blue ends, and extra seals running across the middle, courtesy of Jiraiya. The boy had even taken to putting small red streaks running from his eyes, though his were much shorter than Jiraiya's, barely making it onto his cheek. In addition to all this, the young blonde was growing out his hair to be like Jiraiya's. It was longer than it had ever been, and he had taken to tying shinobi cloth around his forehead to keep it out of his eyes. It wasn't long enough for a ponytail like Jiraiya's, but he was determined to get it there. Naruto smiled at two-toed elders, I sure do, even if he is a pervert and super stubborn. I still need a headband like his so I can match him completely though. Naruto's face dropped for a second at this. You know Naruto boy, we toads are the ones who gave that to Jiraiya boy. The kanji on the front means, oil, and is the symbol of our clan. Fukasaku informed him kindly, and being that you are our newest summoner, I'd say you deserve the opportunity to earn one yourself, don't ya think? Naruto nodded his head vigorously. He really wanted that headband. What do I gotta do, Grandpa Sage? Walk on water? Beat you in a fight? Naruto thought for a second about other ways he could earn the headband before speaking excitedly. I can make a bunch of clones and do the dishes. Jiraiya has me do that all the time before he teaches me something. Naruto rushed out. Actually, that does sound kind of nice, it's AD. Fukasaku was interrupted by a smack on the back of his head, courtesy of his wife. She was not letting him shirk dishes duty again. Ah, that's right, the oath. In order to become a true summoner, you must take an oath never to put the Toad clan in harm's way if possible, and treat all summons as equals. In order to earn the headband, you must take the oath, and learn every Toad's name in the clan. Fukasaku explained after his wife's after his wife's loving correction. I'm not great with names, but oaths I can do. Naruto stopped short. What's an oath? Naruto asked timidly. Why, an oath is just a promise, but more serious. There are consequences if you don't take the oath seriously, or if you break it. Do you think you can take this seriously, Naruto boy? Fukasaku explained and then asked. Of course I can. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, and I never break a promise, ya know. Naruto shouted at the top of his 8-year-old lungs. Oh ho, well Naruto, recite this oath. I, Naruto Uzumaki, summoner of the Great Toad Clan, swear to never do harm to a toad, or put them in unnecessary danger without their permission. I also swear to come to the Toad clans or any member's aid whenever the need should arise. Naruto nodded, the determination that Jiraiya wrote about shining in his eyes for the elder toads to see. I, Naruto Uzumaki, summoner of the Great Toad Clan, swear to never do harm to a toad, or put them in unnecessary danger without their permission. I also swear to come to the Toad clans or any member's aid whenever the need should arise and to become the greatest Toad summoner to ever live, and I swear it on my title of future Hokage. There was a fire lit inside the boy, and though it wasn't tangible, Fukasaku and Shima could feel it. Every toad on the mountain could probably feel it radiating off of him. The two elders believed the boy, and believed that he might just be the child of prophecy. All right Naruto boy, very well said, now let's go get you some food, and introduce you to all of our kin. Shima said. Naruto seemed excited at the prospect of food, though he didn't know that it would consist mostly of bugs. He was more excited to get to know the names of all the toads and get that sweet horned headband Pervy Sage had on though. Jiraiya walked up to the Hokage tower under the cover of night. He had never, in all his years as a shinobi of the Great Leaf, entered through the front door of this building. Not even when he was a genin getting his first E-rank missions. Sarutobi had already been the Hokage at the time, so he would always try to sneak through the window to surprise his sensei, and his sensei would always acknowledge his presence without even turning to look. Considering what had happened though, Jiraiya thought it best not to test any of the ANBU's frayed nerves. After all, it had been one of them that had done the deed. No, he'd better walk through the front door tonight, and slowly at that. So that is what Jiraiya did, acknowledging the Anbu sentries that were out in the open, and ignoring the ones that were hidden. Up to the top of the building he went, never being stopped by anybody, as access to the tower was restricted right now, and everybody in their new Jiraiya had been summoned by his sensei. He came to the double doors of the Hokage's office, took a deep breath, and pushed his way in. Jiraiya, sit. Jiraiya remained standing. Did he really kill every last one of them? Even his family? While the Uchiha clan were technically all related at least distantly, Sarutobi knew what he meant. No, not all of them. He left his little brother, Sasuke. Jiraiya just looked at his sensei blankly. Not even two great shinobi wars and decades out in the field both in combat missions, and as a spy, could prepare him for this. How was he going to explain to Naruto that the boy he always mentioned as a rival and somebody he wanted to beat, would never be the same? Then again, Sasuke was currently experiencing what Naruto had for the first 7 years of his life. Loneliness. All alone, at the ripe old age of 8. Even Tsunade had made it to 27 before she lost everybody that she had loved. The boy was gonna be messed up if somebody didn't help him. How is the boy doing? Jiraiya asked softly. Sarutobi was surprised by this. The village was in great danger. So soon after the Third Great Shinobi War they experienced the Kyuubi attack, and loss of their greatest hero. Now, so soon after that hit to their morale and numbers, they lost an entire clan, possibly their most powerful clan. The village was reeling, and Iwa Stone Village and Kumo Cloud Village would be looking to take advantage of it. Not to mention that their treaty with Suna, Sand Village, was shaky on the best of days. Sure, they had avoided a potential civil war as the Uchiha coup died with its members, but that didn't mean they weren't greatly weakened. Yet, here was Jiraiya, his last true confidant, and perhaps most trusted advisor, worried about a boy who wasn't strong enough to take on a genin yet. But, Jiraiya had spent the last 8 months in Naruto's presence, day after day. No doubt that had influenced him strongly. Sarutobi swore the boy had a superpower, even amongst chakra-wielding shinobi. He has just woken up. He's still in the hospital. It appears that Itachi put him under a genjutsu before he left. Sandaime explained, though it appears he knows what happened, he won't talk to anybody about it, and I'm hesitant to call Inoichi in for a mind walk, as fragile as the boy's mental state is at the moment. Jiraiya growled at this, and the fatherly instinct that he would deny he had kicked in. Did it have to be this way? He spat out. Sarutobi took a second, considering what he would say next. It appears they were going to use Naruto for their plan, or rather, the Kyuubi within him. Sarutobi treaded carefully. We don't know what they would have done if they couldn't find him. I'd taken to sending a Henjit transformed clone in the form of Naruto out now and then so nobody would suspect he was out of the village. The Hokage's voice started to break. The looks my clone got. The treatment he received in place of Naruto. He shook his head. The wise Hokage had no words for it. Jiraiya considered this. He knew his sensei felt bad about Naruto's treatment, about his isolation. It couldn't happen again. Anybody other than Naruto, with his indomitable will, would have folded in a few months at best. It couldn't happen again. Somebody needs to take care of the boy. We cannot let him live in isolation. Jiraiya spoke so quietly even an elite Jonin likely wouldn't have been able to hear him. Sarutobi did. Who? Jiraiya was silent. When Hiruzen looked up, he found his student's eyes staring into his eyes intensely. And then the question was asked. The question Jiraiya dreaded, but brought onto himself. The question he wanted asked, and so desperately didn't. Are you volunteering, Jiraiya? The Hokage stuttered out. Jiraiya didn't answer for a while. A long while, only for a short while. I can't take care of them both forever. I can take him long enough for the village to get over the massacre, at least a little bit, so that he won't be such an outlier. Then he can come back, and someone else can take care of him. A few months tops. It'll be good for Naruto. Jiraiya was already regretting the words. He could barely take care of Naruto. The boy hadn't brushed his teeth for the first 2 weeks because Jiraiya hadn't told him to, and he forgot that young boys needed to be reminded. But he couldn't let it happen again. Not like it did to Naruto. He knew it would be the polar opposite. Naruto was hated for what he carried. Sasuke would be loved for the potential that he carried, or more likely, the potential that his eyes carried. They would both be ostracized for the power they carried within, and he could stop it, at least the worst of it. If he took on Sasuke for a little while, he wouldn't hear the whispers about the massacre every day for the next few months while it was still the talk of the village. He wouldn't be bombarded with questions and looks as he walked down the street. He wouldn't be treated differently just because something a family member of his did that affected him. Maybe Naruto would be good for the boy, Lord knows Sasuke will be good for Naruto. Jiraiya had made up his mind, whether he liked it or not. I promised Itachi that I would keep Sasuke safe. That he would have a chance to grow up here with an unblemished name. Sarutobi responded. He will, he just needs time away from the village. From the people of it, both alive and dead, and the memories they bring. Sarutobi couldn't deny that. Hell, he'd let his own student leave to drown at the memories the village brought up of lost loved ones, who was to deny a child the same right, though with different methods hopefully. Very well. 4 months, tops. In that time I will arrange for another caretaker in place of living for him. The Hokage said. Kakashi. Jiraiya responded. You want Kakashi to take care of the boy? He can barely take care of himself at the moment. All he does is take missions and recklessly train until he drops. No, he would be a horrible caretaker. He needs to talk to the boy though. It'll be good for both of them. I believe Kakashi was Itachi's captain before he was promoted. Sasuke will need to talk about it with somebody who he can relate to, even just a little bit. Jiraiya explained. It was only during times like this that Hiruzen didn't question his student's title as a sage. Despite his childishness and antics, he could occasionally spout wisdom even better than the Hokage himself could. That plan is sound, Sarutobi said. There is an issue with you taking Sasuke-kun though. He explained, you know that we must present a strong front, so you will need to take on missions. Dangerous missions, in dangerous places, to show that we aren't hurting from our diminished forces. I'm well aware. I have a plan for that. Naruto is currently at Mt. Myoboku with the Toads. I believe, given the extenuating circumstances, that the Toads will allow a non-summoner on their sacred grounds. I'll take Sasuke there to stay with Naruto. It will be good for both of them to be away from people for a while. The Toads can also summon and reverse summon me so I can visit sporadically to check up, without losing ground on my missions. Sarutobi nodded at this. It was a good plan, keeping Sasuke away from the rumors and gossip, however short it might be. All right Jiraiya, I will put my faith in you, seeing as I have already failed this village more times than I can count. Take the boy, help him as best you can, and then return for your missions. Sarutobi said, it has already been a week since the massacre. I expect that in another week most other villages will know, so I expect you back and out on a mission before then. The Hokage finished. Jiraiya nodded, and then moved to leave through the window. Nobody would feel threatened by somebody leaving the Hokage tower after all. He opened the window, but before he could leap out of it, Hiruzen stopped him. Jiraiya, thank you. I know you have no wish to take my place, but you are doing a great job making decisions, hard decisions, selfless decisions, that only help others from Konoha, and not yourself. The way I see it, you are our Shadow Hokage. I rule in the light for all to see within the village, but ever since Minato died, you have taken care of the things that aren't seen by the villagers. Do the things that must be done to help in the long run, even if you're the only person who can truly see that at the time. Thank you for your service. The sensei of the Sannin said. Jiraiya didn't turn around, and he didn't need to. Sensei knew him better than anybody else at this point. He nodded ever so slightly, and then took off again. Sasuke didn't know where they were exactly. Jiraiya-sama had said that he was taking him somewhere safe to be with a friend. When he arrived at the colorful mountainside village, he didn't see any friends, just the annoying blonde dead son that had left his academy class a while ago. Pervy sage, what's he doing here? Naruto's tone was accusational. The old man knew he didn't like Sasuke, that he was his rival. You didn't let him sign the summoning contract, did you? No way I'm sharing with that bastard. Naruto shouted. Jiraiya sighed. It seemed one whole day with the Toads wasn't enough to teach him some respect. Oh well, Naruto, language. And no, Sasuke won't be signing the Toad contract, he's just gonna stay here with you for a few months while I take care of some dangerous missions for the village. Too dangerous for a couple of 8-year-olds, sorry. Jiraiya cut off Naruto's train of thought before it could even get going. Naruto hated this, hated that stupid Sasuke with his stoic-looking face, though he had improved greatly in the last 8 months. Plus, he had his shadow clone jutsu so he could beat the jerk up 10 times at once. His internal evil laugh could almost be seen by Jiraiya as he worked out Naruto's thought process, though Sasuke just looked confused, as well as hiding it from his face. Fine old man, but you owe me a new jutsu for this. I wanna learn how to do hair. Naruto finally shouted at his sensei. Very well Naruto, I'll teach you the hair one when I come back for good in a few months. I'll be stopping by every now and then to check up on you guys. Jiraiya turned to Sasuke, you're more than welcome to join Naruto in his training while you're here, or you can just laze around and do whatever pleases you. If you need anything just ask one of the toads, they'll all help you or find one that will free you. Jiraiya explained softly. He hated to leave the boy alone after such a tragic incident, but it was better than being alone in the village. In truth, he was hoping Naruto would spin some of that fiery magic within him and help Sasuke through this tough time. The boy had a way of giving people hope when all had felt lost. Jiraiya left with a call of, "Be good," over his shoulder that was directed at a certain blonde more than the black-haired child. Naruto stuck out his tongue and looked at Sasuke, really looked at Sasuke, for the first time since he left the village, or maybe ever, he thought to himself. The small Uchiha wore a stoic expression like always, face perfectly masked, just as he'd been taught. Naruto saw the truth though, and saw it in his eyes. Sadness. Naruto's own facial expression softened. What happened? He inquired. Sasuke felt betrayed by Jiraiya-sama, who assured him he wouldn't tell Naruto what was going on. He had seen their interaction though, unless they knew some sort of secret code, which he didn't think Naruto capable of learning, the Sannin hadn't said a word. Sasuke grunted. He had been doing that for a week now, but it had worked to get the adults to leave him alone and stop asking him how he was doing. Well, what the hell does that mean? Did you forget how to talk? Or are you just shocked by my pure awesomeness? Naruto questioned brashly. Sasuke was surprised by this. The adults had all left him alone when he did that, as obvious as it was that he didn't want to talk. Maybe the blonde was too dumb to understand. It means I don't want to speak with you, Sasuke said shortly. Why not? Naruto asked back. The question was genuine, and to Sasuke, it didn't just seem like it was out of curiosity. For some reason it felt like Naruto actually cared about him. I don't wish to talk about what happened, Sasuke said, then lowered his eyes and quickly finished, it's too hard. Naruto knew that look. He knew questioning wouldn't help anymore. Okay, well what do you wanna do? He asked. Sasuke was surprised again. Nobody had asked him what he wanted. Sure, they had all wanted to help, but they wanted to do it their way. After a few seconds of thinking, he replied, I want to get stronger. Naruto smiled at that. He understood that. He didn't know Sasuke's reasoning, but he didn't have to. They had the same goal, and that was all that mattered. Alright, well let's start training then. Come on, Grandpa Toad Sage will help us, he's super strong. Naruto grabbed Sasuke by the wrist and took off running towards Fukasaku, who was seated on a toad statue a couple 100 feet away. Sasuke didn't even have time to call Naruto a loser before his wrist was grabbed and he was yanked away. He didn't feel like fighting him either, it felt like too much work after all he had been through, so he just let the blonde drag him. He'd get him back for it later.